Good afternoon. Thank you for choosing my workshop today. I hope that I deliver. Matter of fact, let's start by praying, can we? Dear Father, I thank you so much for this opportunity to come together with people that are world changers, Father. And God, I just pray that you would be with me today. Help me to speak passionately. Father, I pray that you would help me to deliver a message clearly. And Father, I pray for everybody in the room right now that we would just walk away in awe of the potential of the things that you can do, Father. And God, I pray for each person sitting here that you would use them in powerful ways and that you would lead them on an incredible journey. We just pray these things in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. The power of storytelling is incredible, right? We can communicate amazing messages just using a story. Check out what Duracell did in less than 2 minutes. Wow. Was that powerful? Less than 2 minutes. Incredible. Just the power that's there. Matter of fact, advertisers, companies know that they can use story and sell millions, billions, trillions of dollars worth of things. Story is incredibly powerful. And that's really amazing. And as a Christian, it gets me the most excited because think of the message that we have to sell. These guys were selling batteries. What message have we got to communicate? So my name is Pat Roy. I've written probably over about 200 stories that have been produced and gone out to lots of people. God has been very good to me. I've got to tell you, when I was younger, I hated writing. And my mom used to say, Pat, I want you to take creative writing classes in high school. And I said, no way, Mom. I'm never going to use writing ever. Well, God's really always, whenever you say never, God goes, okay, we're going to do that one. So anyway, you know what I have found? Writing has been, aside from family and raising children, writing has been the adventure of my life. It's taken me to places I would have never gone. It's given me conversations with people I would have never had. Writing is an adventure. And some of you in this room who already probably have done even more writing than me, by the way, it's very humbling to be here, know what I'm talking about. How many of you like what Stephen said during his message? Man, that was it. I loved it. And that was kind of the message that I wanted to start off with today because there's a little parable in the Bible. By the way, Jesus told stories. When I started telling stories, I started asking myself, is it okay for me to tell stories? And I realized, oh, Jesus told stories. Well, there's one story, the parable of the talents. Do you remember the master was going to be away for a while? And he gave money to one and another and another. And the first one invested and it brought back more. And the second one invested a little bit less, but also brought back some. And then there was the guy who just buried his talent, right? And boy, it did not end well in the parable of the talents, right? Get away from me, you wicked servant. You know what's so cool is, for those of you who know me, my main deal is I'm a creationist. I am passionate about the creation message. And one thing that I've come to realize is that God foreknew all of us and created all of us with talents and abilities. And what life is an exciting journey of learning what talents God has put into you. And so some of you have realized that you're great writers. Maybe some of you are yet to find that out. That it's something that you're going to find out that you do really, really well. And if God's given you that talent, you want to be like the servants that use their talents for his glory. And there's a few ways we can use talents, right? The first one would be to bury it and ignore it. Just like the one God. That didn't go so well, right? The other thing that you can do with your talents is you can use them for yourself. And that's pretty cool for a while, but just like Stevie said, that's all going to fade, right? But if you use your talent for God, there's nothing better than that, right? I've got to tell you, God has blessed me in that for probably 3 decades now, I've had people come up to me and say that they've been listening to my stories. And a lot of times they'll repeat the plots back to me. And what's funny is they know the story and the characters better than I do now, because that was like so many years ago. I don't even remember, right? But they remember it all. And when they do that, it brings me joy, right? Because it's kind of fun. They know about the characters and they repeat what the plot was and they tell me what the funny lines were and all that kind of stuff. But you know what really gets me? Is when a family comes up to me and tells me how one of their family members got saved, or how they were able to defend their faith because, or they tell me stories about how God used it. And you know what gives me great joy is realizing that had zero to do with me. And to realize that God uses stories in powerful ways. And so, as a writer, you guys have probably experienced this before. When you're a writer, you have everybody and their dog come up to you and tell you what story they're going to write, right? Everybody's got a script or a manuscript or something like that. And so I've had this happen hundreds of times. People come up and say, I've got this really cool story, and basically it's going to be these guys battling it out, and there's these different universes, and it's going to be, and it's like, sounds like a really cool story, but it's like, what's the eternal message? I mean, there's not. Is there anything sinful, by the way, about writing a script that doesn't have an eternal message? Nothing sinful about it. But I guess my question is, why? Why would you trade that for the ultimate joy of the journey of writing something that's going to impact people's lives? You know, there's nothing better. And guess what? When you're dead and gone, it's going to happen to all of us. People may remember your stories, but what if instead it changed lives? That's going to be for eternity. So, you know, writing a story is a lot like birthing a baby. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work to write a story. If you're going to go to all the work, why not go extra mile and make it something that's going to impact something? So that's my encouragement to you, and that's why I titled this the way I did. By the way, I've got to tell you about some irony here. As I did this talk, I don't know how many years ago, at the film festival, and then I went on and taught classes, and then I put that into a book, and now I'm taking the book and turning it back into classes. So what I'm teaching you today comes from this little workbook I did. The premise of my workbook was to make it that you could go step by step, and by the end that you would have a story. Now, check it out. I know many of you have talked to people who have said, I tried to write a story and I never made it, right? I started off with the beginning and it was going so well, and about halfway through, I didn't know how to finish the story. I hear that from people all the time. So here's what we're going to do today. By the way, I'm teaching one class that's broken up into 3 workshops. So if you like what I'm saying, come and join me for the next couple of days, because we're going to make it a third of the way through. Tomorrow is going to be the next third, and then after that's going to be the next third, okay? So instead of making tight little workshops that stood alone, I made a continuing workshop, all right? So here's my premise. Is what would happen if you had a story that was so tightly planned before you even wrote the first sentence of your story that you knew what was going to happen in every single scene? And you had a purpose for every single line in every single scene that you were going to write. You know what that does? It gives you storytelling superpowers. Because then every single scene and every line in every scene has purpose. And so that's what I'm going to be doing today, is talking about that. Now, I watched a ton of YouTube videos to get ready for this because, trust me, I'm not probably the most experienced writer in this room. I know that there's probably others. So I wanted to watch a bunch of YouTube. And so I watched all kinds of Hollywood screenwriters and all of that. And here's my conclusion is that basically they're teaching the same things I am, but people have different terms. And some people say it's 24 beats. Some people say you can do it in 7 steps. It's 3 acts, it's 4 acts, it's no acts, right? So when you start watching out there, there's all kinds of terminology. What I'm going to do is teach you with the terms and the way that I figured it out over the years that I've been doing it, okay? So just remember, people can have different opinions. Here's the other thought that I have is my daughters just got their driver's licenses, and they've got the little driving manual, right? The driving manual says 300 feet before the intersection, you signal, right? And they talk about when you turn, you've got to turn into the first lane. And then they would get in the car with me and they go, like, Dad, you're like breaking all the rules. Well, I'm a pretty good driver, but I'm experienced, right? So I've been out on the road so long, I know that some of those rules really aren't making for good driving, right? It's because I'm experienced at it. But they had to start off with the manual telling them all of the little rules that go along with storytelling. So over the next 3 workshops, I'm going to be taking you back and talking about all the rules, realizing that as you get more and more experience, that those rules start to fall away and you start to trust your natural ability to tell a story, okay? So that's what we're going to be doing over the next 3 workshops. I hope you stick with me. All right, so here's some traditional thinking when you're telling a story is that you come up with a great what if. By the way, what is a what if? Can somebody raise your hand and tell me what a what if is? What is a good what if? Okay, come on, I've got a room of storytellers here. Nobody's going to answer my question? Really? Okay, so every story premise should be able to be asked in one question, a great what if. So I was thinking about this myself. So we're here with Stephen and Alex Kendrick, facing the Giants. What if God teaches a high school football coach that he's training his team for a godly life and not just doing football? Wow, that like summarizes the whole movie, right? Beyond the Mask, how many people have seen it? Oh my goodness, that's such a good movie. What if a spy for the East India Trading Company decides to start a new life in America and ends up playing a role in the formation of the United States? Fireproof. What if the father of a man who is headed for divorce gives him a book that will lead him step by step to save his marriage? So it's a what if. It's like a good story premise. And you should be able to come up with a what if for your story. So here's how traditional thinking goes is I'm going to come up with my story premise, my what if, and then I'm going to write my story based on the what if. All right, so here's what I'm suggesting to you. What if we do it with eternal thinking in mind? So thinking with eternal purpose. What if we start with an eternal concept, something that we want to teach the audience, something that God has put a passion in your heart to tell people? What if you start with that first and then do a what if, and then you tell the story? So that's what we're going to be doing over the next 3 workshops is talking about that. Okay, one of the things that we are going to be doing a lot is brainstorming together. I want to talk about brainstorming. And I wanted to share a verse with you that my wife, by the way, my wife is my writing partner. We have written so many different stories together. And here's how Sandy starts off, is she starts off by usually praying this. And so I just wanted to share this verse with you. How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more than number in the sand. You know what my wife Sandy does? Is we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, let's come up with a great story. What do we want to teach? God, give us creative ideas. And she'll pray with this, pray this prayer and say, Lord, how precious are your thoughts? God, please help us to have creative ideas. And so I always start by praying before I start thinking of something. All right, so I'm saying that it all begins with coming up with an eternal lesson that you want to teach in your story. Now, how many of you have already got scripts that you're writing? Okay, great. So, later on as we get into structure, hopefully that'll be more specifically specific to what you're already doing. How many of you are hoping to write a script? Haven't started. Okay, great. All right. So, listen, what we're going to be doing over the next 3 days is going to be really important for that. So here is how I would begin, is asking yourself, what is God asking me to teach in my story? Okay, so choosing an eternal topic is what I call it. And so I go out sometimes and I pray, or I walk along the beach if I can. I talk to friends, but I spend a lot of time seeking the Lord and saying, Lord, what is it that you have me to share? So here's some questions that you can ask yourself. What things are you passionate about? What happens when a writer writes something they're not passionate about? Kind of end up with a story that's passionate, right? Yeah, it's flat. Exactly. What things are you good at doing? What things do you know? What has God put into your heart? What topic would have you put value? By the way, I want 3 volunteers to come up. So let's go. Who wants to come up and volunteer? Raise your hand. Come on up. Feel like a game show. Come on up. One last person. All right, come on down. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, so let's line up in the order that you volunteered. So you're right here. All right, and you can be right there beside her. And you right over there. By the way, what's your name? Really loud. Mary Beth. Mary Beth, where are you from? Alabama, okay. Rhonda, where are you from? Okay, very good. I see an Alabama thing going on. That's really cool. All right, so welcome to our little game show. Here's what we're going to do is we're going to go in order. I want you to pick your favorite that you would like. It's a gift for you to keep, so why don't you grab what you would like, and then why don't you come over here and stand over here. Feel free to pick any one of the 3. Oh, she's so wise, isn't she? Is she wise? Okay, excellent. Very good. All right. Yeah. All right, so why don't we start over there? Why don't you open your package? What have you got in there? Oh, trash. Yay, woo! All right, some trash and a gift card. Yes. Yes, my wife put lots of tissue paper. The gift card! I see a theme going here. All right, and yours is Hawaii! Woo! Oh man, a bunch of trash. Cheats can take. Poor guy. Will you forgive me? All right. So you guys already know where I'm going with this, right? When you write a story, there are 3 different basic stories, right? Is that you can tell a, well, let's start right here. And this is a lot of times how Hollywood does it, right? Is it's a well-done story that was so well written, but the content, there's nothing there, right? It's just a lot of times trash. Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, 0. I could have at least found coal, right? Should have put some coal in there. Right? And so it's this beautiful story, but when you get down to it, there's not really any content. Exactly. All right. McDonald's bag you found not so appealing, but well, why'd you go for that one? Because you knew a trick was up, right? Okay, very good. You know, a lot of times this is Christian productions, right? They're really maybe not that great of a story, but man, there's something really good inside. By the way, I want you to know that I have written a ton of stories like this. But guess what? God still uses them. You know why? Because it's about what he was doing, not about what I was doing. I kid you not. I've written some horrible stories that are terrible. But God still used them, and I still have people telling me how it changed lives, right? And then we've got this one right here, beautiful on the outside and had substance on the inside. This is our goal, right? We want to write a story that's so good that it doesn't distract from the message. And so that is our goal. This is definitely not our goal. But I want you to know that not all's lost over here too. In fact, I hear Christians say, we've got to be the best. We've got to do the best story. We've got to do the best production. We've got to best acting, best director. I love that Stephen started off today by talking about in the beginning, they didn't even know what they were doing, and God still used it to reach millions, right? Is it important to be as good as we can? Yes. But guess what? It's God's message, not our stuff. All right, let's go to my hand. Thank you, guys. Sorry about the nothing. You don't want to keep that? Okay. You can have that if you want. Did you? Wow, that was very cool. All right. So that's the importance of putting an eternal message into your production. And so, you know what I do a lot is I brainstorm things. So when you're thinking of your eternal lesson that you want to do, go out and brainstorm. But real quick, I would love to brainstorm about brainstorming. How's that? That's like seeing a reflection and a reflection and a reflection. Okay, guys, brainstorm time. When you brainstorm, how do you do a great job brainstorming? What are the rules of brainstorming? Okay. Everything counts. Okay, good. That's what else happens with brainstorming? No filters. Good. What's that? Look to other stuff. What do you mean by that? Awesome. How many of you guys like using your hands and could think when you know what I used to do is I used to write at a place where there was a basketball court, and I would go out and shoot hoops. I'm great at basketball. And I would think of stuff while I was out using my hands. Okay, here is a valuable secret. Probably not a secret, just a valuable lesson. If you listen to my words for the next few moments, they can be life-changing if you don't already know this. If the analyzer creative person. Now, right now, you guys are using your analyzer. I'm cool with that. Wow. And you know what happens is if you let both of them work at the same time, they kind of like cancel each other out. And so I think it's so key to become disciplined about when you switch over to letting the creative person go and when you let the analyzer go. But if you let them both into your brainstorm situation at the same time, it's not going to work. So the first thing I do when I brainstorm is I let the creative person just go for it. And you know what happens is the analyzer tries to come out and take over, right? Well, that's kind of, how would that work? Here's the one that really gets me is, well, how would that ever work into your story, right? It's the analyzer criticizing. But if I can just shut up that voice and say, nope, I'm not listening to the analyzer, I'm just going to listen to the creative person, all of a sudden you are free to brainstorm. Wow, that's pretty cool, right? All right, so I'm going to have a little sample story that I'm going to run through with you as we talk about this. So let's say it's time for me to brainstorm my eternal lesson. So I just tried to come up with stuff that I could use for an example real quick. Again, for those of you who know me, my real passion is creation, all right? I teach creation science all the time. I'm a creation speaker. So I start thinking about some of my eternal lessons. So as I'm praying, wow, maybe I could talk about evangelism, the importance of evangelism. Oh, family missions to Africa, helping siblings to get along. Maybe scientific apologetics. Oh, yeah, baby, that's kind of where I live. I love that. And then I start coming up with all these medical ethics in the Bible history of the world. So I am just brainstorming any ideas that come to mind as I'm praying. Dear Lord, please help me to have ideas. Okay? So creativity is just going for it. But then you know what happens? Is it's time for creativity to go away. And now it's time for me to switch over to analyzing. Okay? It's kind of fun because now you get the switch. And then what I do is I maybe give myself a couple hours or maybe a couple of days, or don't go weeks, but you want to go for a little while and then come back and look at your list. By the way, I've provided you guys with lists if you want to use them later on. And I go through and I critically analyze that, and I go evangelism. Well, I would give that a 7. So I start rating them on a 1 to 10 basis. Family missions to Africa, well, that's cool, but not real passionate about it. Helping siblings, nah, not really. Scientific apologetics, ding, 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 ding. Medical ethics, boom, boom, boom. I do all of that, and I rate them all and check out the one that I was the most passionate about. Now, I told you that my wife is a lot of times riding with me. my wife gave me a great little tip, and I thought this was so funny because it ended differently than I thought. She said, if it's tied and you can't figure out which one to go for, get a quarter and flip the quarter and see if it's heads or tails. And I thought she was going to say, and you should give one heads and one. You know what she said? She said, if it lands and you feel disappointed, go with the other one. Isn't that cool? So after going through these, I realized that dominion and green movement is what I want to do. Okay? Again, I'm going to lead you through a series of steps that I take to do this. In this particular workshop, we're going to talk about setting the foundation for the story. Next time we get together tomorrow, if you come back, we're going to start talking about story structure. We're actually going to go through and talk about what a story actually looks like. We're going to be talking about inciting moments. We're going to be talking about conflict. We're going to be talking about resolution, the climax. We're going to talk about all those things. Okay, so today is just the setup for all of that. But tomorrow we'll start getting into the actual specifics. Okay, so now I've got an eternal lesson, right? And I've been praying about it, and I've been feeling like God wants me to write a story about dominion and the green movement, right? Because in Genesis 1, God gives us dominion. And yet we see all around us right now that people are worshiping the creation instead of the creator. Are we supposed to be good stewards of the earth, by the way? Right. Are we supposed to worship creation? No, we worship the creator, right? And so that's why I was passionate about that. Okay, so now I've got an eternal lesson. I'm going to move to my second step, and I'm going to try and choose a what if. All right? So I'm keeping in mind what my eternal lesson is going to be, and I start thinking of a one question that can be the what if that goes along with my eternal lesson. Okay, so again, I brainstorm. Okay, so again, this is going before the Lord and saying, Lord, give me ideas. Also, you can talk to other people about it, right? And say, what do you think? Here's the lesson that I feel like the Lord's leading me to teach. Have you got a good story that would go with that? So when I was brainstorming, and again, my brainstorms here that I'm showing you, these examples, I probably brainstormed these in about 5 minutes, okay? So these are just real fast brainstorms. What if a town passes a mandatory green law? What if a team of whalers rescue an environmentalist from the sea? Ooh, that's got some. What if we trace two lives as they grow up? One friend follows the noble pursuit of the green movement, the other is biblical stewardship. All right, so I start listing out my brainstorm. And remember, it's creativity that's doing this. I'm not allowing the analyzer to come in. I'm just writing down things that could be possible what ifs. Okay, and then I do the same thing as I go through and rate them. And boom, as I went through and looked at this, that one is the one, the team of whalers rescues an environmentalist from the sea. That's got some real possibilities. What a great story, right? Can you imagine what that would be like? So that's the one that I chose for our example. Anybody have any questions or thoughts so far on anything that I've been saying? You guys with me? All right, so for our example story, that's what I'm going to do. All right, before we get into structure, I just want to point out one thing very quickly. And again, tomorrow, if you come back tomorrow, we're going to go through the specifics of story structure. But when it comes to stories, there's two basic types of story, and that's an internally driven story and a plot-driven story. Now, you guys probably know what I mean by that. An internal story is a story that's taking place inside your characters. As a writer, you're going to set a goal, and we're going to talk about this specifically tomorrow. You're going to be setting a goal for your characters, and an internal plot is something internal that has to happen for those characters. A plot-driven story is one that's usually, those are like the action-packed stories. Okay? So you're telling two stories. You're telling stories of things that are externally happening to your characters, but you're also telling a story of what's happening internally on your character. Most stories favor one or the other, but you know the perfect story focuses on both. Matter of fact, I bet if I asked you to name some of the most action-packed stories you could name, I bet if we really looked at them, that they were more internally driven than externally. By the way, if you're doing an action-packed story, well, if you're doing any story, one of the most important challenges you have as a writer is making your audience care about your characters. I wrote this story once, and I had the good guys were hanging over a cliff, and when I went back and read through the script, it's like, I don't really care if they're hanging. And I went, why don't I feel anything about these guys almost about to die? I went, oh, I haven't made anybody fall in love with them. So here's what you do to your characters. When you fall in love with them, then you shove them off as well. All right? You've got to make people care about your character, or they don't care at all about what's happening. Okay? So tomorrow, as we talk about story structure, we're going to talk a lot about how you accomplish all of this. So for right now, I just wanted you to start thinking about the fact that when you write a good story, you're dealing both with internal and with external things that are happening to you. All right, my wife Sandy, before we started writing, she went to a writer's seminar, and they said that one of the first things you should do is create characters. And I went, wait, what? And that seemed completely wrong to me, but I'm going to make a case for why. And I think as you are with me for the next 3 days, you'll see how this unfolds. It was interesting to me, but we started trying to do it that way, and it was kind of amazing how creating these amazing characters, having a what if and an eternal message, all of a sudden the story started coming together almost by itself before we even started doing all the other things. And so let's talk about creating characters. By the way, creating characters is going to be one of the most important things that you do for your story. Okay? Now, remember, my goal is to make everything super easy. That's why I did the workbook. It's just to keep it all super simple. I'm a simple guy, so I'm going to give you simple steps. But when you create characters, it comes down to two very basic steps, in my opinion. One is creating their personality, who they are, and then their character role. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then the biggest thing with a character is their character arc. So think about character arcs as the story of what's happening internally to your character. And that is super important. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow. So here's my thought is, remember my sample story is that what if a whaler falls into the ocean and is saved by a whaling ship? I mean, what if an environmentalist falls into the ocean and is saved by a whaling ship? Well, let's see. I need the environmentalist, right? Or I'm going to need the guy to rescue him out of the sea. Just based on my message and my what if, I'm already starting to see some characters starting to emerge, right? So here's a trick that my wife and I learned early on is find a picture of your character. Start looking online, start looking at magazine covers, and find a picture of your character. Now, you don't know a lot about them yet, right? But check it out. Here's a picture of somebody. Now, just look at that guy. What can you guys tell me about that guy? Go ahead, you can volunteer quickly. He's searching. Okay, that's excellent. He seems determined. Okay. Okay, he looks intelligent. He looks worried. Good job, guys. Do you see how much you just told me by looking at the picture? You know, I've done this for so many stories I've written where I actually find a picture of my characters and I just stare at them. And all of a sudden, a personality starts to emerge. And it's almost like I picked a character based on what they look like because inherently I felt something already in that picture that I liked to be in my character. But once I chose the picture, I could start thinking about what is that person like. All right, we are going to rush through way too much stuff, way too fast, because we're learning the art of storytelling, which could take years and years, and we're going to pack it all in a very short time. So I'm going to keep motoring ahead. If you guys have questions or things you want to ask. So the next part of finding, once you have a character's picture, the next thing for you to do is start thinking about the personality of your character. What is your personality like? What is the personality of the character? Now check it out. If you make characters that think the same way you do, how's your story going to turn? Kind of dull and boring, right? Because all the characters are going to be one-dimensional. They're going to be you. And so you really need to think through, what are the personalities of my character? How many of you have used the Myers-Briggs stuff? Okay, does everybody know what that is? So Myers-Briggs, it's a personality study. You can go online, you can take the Myers-Briggs test, right? And it has you answer a bunch of questions. And at the end, it tells you what type of personality you have. According to Myers-Briggs, there's 16 basic different personalities that you can have. You know what's really cool is when you start working on a character, go to the Myers-Briggs test and start answering the questions for your character. And don't answer them for you, start answering them for your character. And what's kind of cool is it will help you to start thinking through who this character is. So who is your character? What are they like? Are they a helper? Are they selfish? Are they somebody who's gregarious? What is your character like? As you're thinking about it, and you're thinking about your story, and you're thinking about what you want to accomplish, you want to start thinking through personalities of what that person is like. Okay, so I said that characters, personalities, are one aspect of it. By the way, here's a very important thing. Remember, we're going to use storytelling to teach eternal lessons, right? You know what that means? Is that your characters need to have some kind of a flaw or something inside of them that you're going to work on through your story. And guess what? That becomes the engine for the eternal lesson. Because as they're working through that, and the audience is loving that character, they're going along the journey with the character. And all of a sudden, that becomes the source of how you can teach your eternal message. All right, I'm going to talk about character roles real quick. By the way, on your little handout, I've got a sheet where I put these there for you. So as I've thought through it, and as I've written, and as I've studied, I've realized that there's several different roles that characters can play. Okay, now these are not personality types, okay? But these are what role will be played in your story. So let's just run through these quick. So the main character. The main character is the one that the whole story is about, right? Okay? And then there's an obstacle character. An obstacle character stands in the way of the main character. Okay, we all know the protagonist, right? Protagonist, this is the one who drives the goal of the story forward, okay? So the story is being driven forward. By the way, some of you are probably confused and going, wait, Pat, I thought that was the main character. A lot of times we combine the main character and the protagonist together. And it really works that way because the one that the story is all about is a lot of times the one that's driving the story forward. Do you know it doesn't always have to be that way? So when I taught this very class at the film festival several years ago, somebody said, Pat, you have an example of when the protagonist and the main character are two totally different people. You know what my answer was? I literally stood here going, I can't think of it. Okay, you ready to find out how ironic that is? The story that I wrote for 18 years, Jonathan Park, was that very way. And here's what I mean by that, is the story, the main character was about Jonathan. It was all seen through his eyes, and the story was all about him, but it was his father was actually the one that was always driving the story forward. Okay, so these don't have to be the same person. Antagonist is the one who opposes the protagonist in accomplishing the goal. We're going to find out later as we talk about this that the protagonist is trying to get to the goal, but the antagonist is the one that's completely opposing him all of the time. Okay, did you realize that the obstacle character and the antagonist are oftentimes the same person? Okay, you can also break those two. You can actually have a character who's standing in the way of the main, meanwhile the antagonist is standing in the way of the protagonist. Okay, reason. This is the person that's making their decisions based on logic. So we all know a TV series where that's the case, right? Where it's only logic, right? And then you've got the emotion, driven by their feelings. You've got the sidekick. The sidekick assists the main, the protagonist, or the antagonist, right? The antagonist can have a sidekick. You've got the skeptic. The skeptic is the one that's doubting the main protagonist or the antagonist, right? So the skeptic is coming along maybe to the protagonist and going, never going to work. And then you've got the guardian. This is usually the wise person that is preparing the way, encouraging the main protagonist. And then you've got the antagonist, which is preparing the way for the antagonist and distracting the protagonist. Okay, so how many of these do you need to write a story? You need all of these in the story? No. Who do you need in the story? You need your protagonist and you need the antagonist. You need somebody who's moving towards a goal, and you need to have somebody that's opposing them. Okay, now it gets even more crazy. Can one person play those both roles? Yeah. So it gets kind of crazy, right? Okay, how about this? Does it have to be a person that plays those roles? What if they're battling it out against the storm, right? All of a sudden, it's not even a person, right? So these are not hard, fast rules. You do not need to have all of these people in your story, but what you do need is a protagonist and an antagonist, okay? You need somebody who's moving towards the goal, and you need somebody that's opposing you, okay? But then as you're writing roles, you can start to see that there's different characters that would fill those different roles that I've got to do. By the way, you'll notice that these are all like two different sides of the penny, right? Because think about it, it's the obstacle that's standing in the way of the main, the antagonist standing in the way of the protagonist. The emotion and the reason are at odds with each other, right? And then you've got the sidekick and the skeptic, you've got the guardian and the antagonist. They're opposing each other. So it's almost like these roles are all opposing each other. Okay, again, we're going so super fast. Any questions? Yes, so they're almost like, for the guardian, you know what that is, right? It's coming up to the main character and saying, here's some wisdom. Have you thought about it? It's the one that's preparing the way. Okay, so think of the antagonist as doing the same thing for the antagonist. He's the one preparing the way and enabling the antagonist. All right, so much to cover. So, you guys okay so far? Okay. Here's what I do when I write a story, is because we back up. So we've talked about the personality of our characters, okay? And now we talk about the different roles. But the most important thing for your characters is they have to go on a journey. Did you know that your audience really cares more about your character's internal journey than they do about the external journey? And so that internal journey is so important. And I think what happens a lot of times is writers start writing a script, and they're going to take their characters on this internal journey, and they start writing scenes, and then somewhere in the middle, they're not quite sure how to put that internal journey. Okay, so remember, my job is to make things super simple, because that's the way my brain works. Let me show you an easy way that I do character arcs, okay? So a story, oh wait, let me back up. Let me show you real quick something else. And I'm sorry, I've got a paper for you like this, it's in your handout. Before we go to character arc, here's what I do a lot of times, is I'll take my picture. So remember, mine's about a environmentalist who falls into the sea, right? So here's the picture I picked for him, all right? And so here's what I do, is I just take one sheet, and I come up with his name, okay? So I stare at the picture, and to me, he looked like Brian Lytle or something. By the way, do you want to Google names before you use them? Yes. You don't want to find out that your good guy is actually an axe murderer who took out like 13 people in damage, right? At the same time, is there any name that you could Google that doesn't come up with something, right? And you get to decide what your name's going to be, but your name should match the picture. Type of character, okay, for him, in my pretend story that I'm making, who's going to be my main character, right? Personality, I went through and decided that he's going to be a debater. He's outspoken. He jumps into adventure without thinking, and he's self-centered. Okay? So I'm thinking through his personality. And then here's what I do, is I just write a little bit of backstory. And think about this. I haven't even really got a clue where my story's going yet. But just based on the picture, his his type of character and his personality, I start to give him a little bit of backstory, and I just write one paragraph. So for my particular one, for Brian, I said he's always loved animals and began classes in veterinary science in college, but was bored, so eventually dropped out and began working with animal activists. As a grandmother who used to take him to church when he was young, while he loved her, he didn't see the validity of her faith. He often finds himself getting in over his head and never following through. While he hopes to someday make a great scientific contribution, he can't seem to get his personal life in order. Check it out. Just thinking about my eternal message and my what if, I just wrote a little bit of a backstory, and it's only a paragraph. It didn't take me very long to do that, but can you already see my story starting to converge a little bit? Okay, well, aside from my environmentalist that falls into the sea, I've got to have a sea captain on the whaling ship, right? So I check for pictures, and oh, wow, that guy looks a lot like what I would want my sea captain. Right? So I start thinking about that. I want a good solid name, Thomas Henry, what I thought when I saw him. Type of character, he's going to be my protagonist and guardian. Do you see how I combine those? He's going to be the one that's actually moving the plot forward for my main character, but he's also going to be the one that's going to come alongside and give wisdom to the main character. Personality, he's a defender. He's rugged. He has integrity. He's quiet, but he's strong. You see how I'm just starting to think through my characters, put things down? Backstory. The recreational fisherman his whole life, and after the death of his wife, he decided to pursue his hobby of full-time by joining the crew of a whaling ship. He was raised in a Christian home, but it wasn't until the long journeys at sea he began to rely fully on the Lord. He stays in close contact with his son. He is now a commercial salmon fisherman. He has training as an EMT. I'm just writing a backstory. Now, am I going to use this backstory in my story? Maybe. Maybe not. But you know, it's given some depth of my character already. And I'll tell you, as I'm reading this, I'm already starting to see things jumping off the page that I think could start becoming part of my story. All right, let me go back to where I was before. Character arc. Most important thing in your story is to have character arc. Your characters have got to go on a journey. And like I said, a lot of times, writers start writing a script, and they write scene 1, scene 2, and they keep writing it about halfway through. They're so lost in the weeds that they don't even know how to make a journey for the character. What if you had a character arc from the very beginning that you knew that you were going to write? So how do you do that? Does somebody know what an inciting incident is? Yes, what's an inciting incident? Yes, that is true. By the way, we're going to talk about the inciting incident a lot tomorrow during this time. But it's something that happens in your life that completely changes your life. By the way, it's going to be the impetus for the rest of your story. Okay, and that's what happens to your main character. Okay, so that is an inciting incident. Okay, I told you I'm a creationist, right? Love this law of cause and effect. Every material effect must have an adequate or antecedent or simultaneous cause. Here's what that means. Every action that happens, every result has to have an action that justifies it. So if I'm walking along and I see a building that's completely toppled, I don't say, wow, I bet a group of ants did this. Because that's unbelievable, right? Thank you, Kyle, the other creationist in the room. Yoo-hoo! This is Kyle Justice back there, by the way. Hello, Kyle. Thanks for being a part of this. All right, so what's that mean as a creationist? Well, if the result is the entire universe, what was the cause of that? Something much greater, right? Okay, the reason I say that is because when we make an inciting incident or when we create a character arc, it has got to be so well done that it justifies where it lands the character, right? How many of you have watched a movie, a Christian movie, or a Christian radio drama, probably some of mine, and it just feels cheesy, right? The character becomes a Christian at the end, and you go, no way. You don't buy it, right? You go, cheesy, The reason you're saying that is because the problem was with the character arc. If you don't have a solid character arc that justifies where the character comes out, your audience is not going to buy it. By the way, if you're trying to give an internal message, your message doesn't go very deep. When you feel like there's a cheesy storyline, you go, nah, I don't buy it. When it's well done, it goes deep. The internal message goes deep. By the way, in some stories that we were writing, we had a bad guy that was a bad guy forever on our continuing story that we were doing. And eventually the audience started telling us that they wanted him to become a Christian. We were like, okay. He had done so many bad things. How do you turn him into being a Christian? And so we decided to do that over 12 episodes. And so we wrote a 12-episode character arc for him. And we've had to realistically think through where was he beginning and where was he going to end up. And then we had to think of realistic steps that would have to happen for him to make it there. Now, I told you that I've written some cheesy character arcs. All right? I've done it. But you know what's so cool with this one? Is when we were done with this one, people were crying in the studio when we got to the scene where he became a Christian. And then all of a sudden, I got emails from people that were saying that their families were sitting together just bawling their eyes out. That's a successful character. When somebody walks away and goes, that was cheesy. That's when you failed as writers, right? Okay, so let's do a character arc for Brian here. Watch how simple this is. Brian, where does he start out? We see his strong commitment to saving planet Earth. Where do I want him to end up? Because now remember, I'm thinking about my what if and my eternal message. I want him to end up realizing the depravity of his heart, and he rejects the evolutionary worldview. See how easy that is? Where's my character starting? And where is he going to end? By the way, you want an ending that's a big enough payoff for your audience, right? You want to go on an emotional journey where they're with the character the whole way. All right, so am I done? No. Now I've got to think, how do I get from there to there? And then here's what I do is I begin to pray. By the way, I've worked with friends on character arcs where we all sit around and actually discuss how would somebody get from step one all the way down to the bottom. And you really have to think through a realistic steps that somebody would take to get there. If your steps are fake, your character arc is easy. But if they're real steps that somebody would really have to take to get there, that's going to justify your art. So I went through and I realized a strong commitment to saving the Earth. Oh, my inciting incident, that could be next. He ends up falling into the sea and left behind, and the whaler saves him. He's put in a situation where he sees how his views are ineffective. He sees how his views are dangerous and making things worse. Once again, he's in mortal danger, and the whaler comes to the rescue. He's confronted with a situation where the whaler's Christian worldview works and his does not. And then, boom, he realizes the depravity of his heart and rejects his evolutionary worldview. Okay, I'm doing an example for you today. So I've got 7 steps there. You know what's probably more realistic is 13, 20, okay? So it depends on how many realistic steps your character would have to take. And later on, those are going to become scenes as you're writing your script, okay? We are close to the end here. Again, next time, if we come back, we'll actually get into the actual story structure. And what we'll do is we'll go through how to put all of this together. Again, my goal is if you can think through those things prior to writing your script, by the time you get to the place where you write your script, you're just going to turn all of these things right into scenes, and it's going to be a powerful script where every single part of your script has meaning and has purpose to it. If you stick with me for the 3 days, I think we'll be able to do that. Okay, I gave you the handout. I've got little brainstorms that you can do if you would like. I've got the different character roles. I've got a little sheet here just to show you an example of what I use for when I start putting together my characters. And then there's also a little sheet on here where you can start working a character arc. In the workbook that I've got, I've actually go through in much more depth than we're doing today. And I take you step by step. If you follow each step, by the end, you'll literally have an entire story in colored steps. I'm hoping that we can do the same thing through the workshops. With all that said, do you have any questions? Yes. Well, you got to be creative, right? Okay, so for this particular one, I put in, okay, so he's asking, what do you put in the search engine to find a picture? So what I did for him is I put in hippie, right? And I did an image search, and I'm going through all the pictures. And I went, oh, man, got to move past that one, got to keep going. And then I went, that's him. It's almost funny because as you start thinking about your characters in your mind, you already kind of know what they look like. And it's funny that you can find them online. When I did the whaler, I typed in wise captain and that other picture. Okay, now these are copyrighted, right? I can't use them. But you know what I can use them for is one is I'm writing, I've got these on my desk, and I'm thinking about these people all of the time. But guess what that turns into is someday when you get to the point of casting and auditioning, you already kind of know the look you're looking for, right? Or if you start doing publicity and you need artwork or illustrations, you already kind of have a picture of who those people are. And isn't it powerful how that picture communicates so much? I mean, just looking at that guy tells you a lot. Or if you look at my sea captain there, it's not. Okay, great question. Anybody else? Oh yeah, those are down at the there's a speaker book table that's down there. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, no, we won't cover that. And yes, so in other words, you hire a graphic person and or an illustrator, and they make. So, okay, so are you saying? I'm not quite sure what. Well, and I think as you're writing your character, your main character's arc, right? That's really the main arc that you're going to be using, right? Now, as you're making the other arcs, you want those to fit in with what's going on. By the way, should all your characters have an arc? That's easy. Do you know if you wrote a script where you had 15 different characters and they all had arcs, you would wear your audience out and it would be so confusing, right? So you're going to choose just a few of your characters that will have their arcs, and then you're going to drive those deep, okay? And your main character has to be the one that has the main deep character arc that you want. But can you have a character arc for bad guy? You have an sidekick. Yeah, you can do that. You can choose to have a character arc. So you want to pick which ones you're going to have a character arc for, and then you want to drive it. Okay. Right. Right. So did they pull it off with the movie though? Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So there's not like a rule of you've got to have this many, but as a writer, you have to master it, right? You have to make it that the character arcs that you're working on, that you're driving them deep. If you have more than you're able to handle, that's going to show, right? So I think you leave it to the story to decide how many character. Well, yeah, I would say that's probably true for children. You probably want to keep it a little simple, right? But yeah, right. So, yeah, it's super important. Character arc is probably the most important. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, if you join me tomorrow, we're actually going to go through, I'm going to put a story structure up on the board, and then we're going to go through it, and I'm going to talk you through point by point what has to happen in your story, okay? By the way, I'm going to ask you this question tomorrow. You can start thinking about this. Who invented story arc? I'm going to ask you that tomorrow, right? Think about it. Who invented story arc? I listened to a bunch of YouTube videos and a bunch of Hollywood screenwriters, and they all had answers on those, and none of them got it right. So that's your homework. Who invented story arc? Okay, I think we're all done. Thank you so much for being here.